Welcome to episode 5 of the Ryan, Fenton, and Alex Lore podcast, which we said would have a name this week, and it may. If you see the title on this, that means it is. We worked considerably hard on this, Alex. I will say we had a lot of back and forth, a lot of brainstorming. We brought in a professional branding or a branding professional, I should say, to help us with a brainstorming exercise. So we have some finalists we've narrowed it down to, and you may or may not see it appear on the title of this week's episode. So we'll just leave it at that. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, it's taking a long time because we care about it and it matters. So we don't want it to be frivolous. And maybe you noticed, but there's a lot of podcasts in the world, and we want to be able to own something. So it's a labor of love. We're close.
We had a couple names we really liked, and then we're like, oh, wait, there's 8 other podcasts named that already.
Yeah, that's the hard part right there. So anyways, we know what we want, but it's, we're close. We're close. So we're sending some feelers out to the people that we trust, some creative minds we trust, and getting some feedback. And so hopefully that feedback is exuded in this title, above or below where you're looking at your screen right now.
Yes. Either way, it's been a fun first few episodes, and we've focused a lot on how runners and coaches and agents and really the industry at large has been affected with a lot of what's going on right now. We wanted to change it up a little this week and not focus so much on, hey, what is happening right now with COVID, right? We've been in that world. It's healthy to get out of it a little bit, maybe expand the horizons, learn some new things. In the COVID mindset, you think about all this social distancing and being away from people and how that affects running. What I've found myself is, like, when I go out on a run right now, I'm trying to think of what is the place in Austin I can go where I'm not seeing anybody, right? And my mind has drifted towards the trails and figuring out what trails I can go where there's not going to be any. I've gone to a couple where I'm like, it's a random time of the day on this trail, no one's going to be here. Alex used to live here, like parts of the green belt, and I've gone and it's just like hammered with people. So like it's been actually challenging, but that segues into this episode being a little bit geared on the trail side. That's my COVID to trail transition that will lead us in today. But Al, trails on your end, I'm interested in your experience with trail running and where you've found some exciting places to go.
Well, I got spoiled while I was out in Portland, that's for sure. And that's I think where the love of trails first really started for me. I also, I was someone who I got a little burnt out on the road world. That there'd be times when, just because I was in the industry for a while and even going to Boston Marathon, I just got the love and the prestige of it just kind of got morphed into, I just saw it as work mode. And I just saw it as going to the expo and lots of jackets and you know what I mean? And I started to lose that pure love for racing. And I found that in the trail community. And I did a couple trail races out there and, I did a couple 50Ks. I did one on Oregon coast. I did one around Mount St. Helens where I ended up literally crawling and going off course by a lot. But then, last summer I was able to pace my buddy Tyler out at Western States. And it was just an experience that I've been hoping to find for a long time. And it was just like this great moment and this great celebration of our community, of the community, I'd say. And if you haven't been to a trail race, please find a small one that you can even volunteer at. It's a giant party, and there's just an overall momentum of humanity there, and I encourage you to seek that out. But while I was there, I did get to lay eyes on the masterpiece that Jim put a bow on for Western States last year after finally breaking the record 2 years ago. He smashed it again this past summer. And again, I still am I've been trying to wrap my brain around how he did it, and I just think that Jim is somebody who's literally shifting our perceptions of what's possible, how you can train. But he's like a really great kind of crossover person for our community to learn about, because he does have that he does have the track cred, and I think most of our flow track community comes from that track and collegiate, background. And I think he has that identity. He went to Air Force Academy, was a steeple finalist, and but he transitioned, and I think he's a great kind of ambassador for that trail community.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Alex is talking about Jim Walmsley, and that will be this week's guest. And you mentioned Al, he was a steeple finalist. He's alumni at Air Force Academy, but 2-time Western States champ, both those times breaking the record. The second time you mentioned where you were at, breaking his own record. He's a world mountain running champ last year in 2019, the 50-mile world record holder. And most recently, was the Olympic Marathon Trials qualifier, where he's run 63 minutes for half marathon. So really the most important of all of this, though, is probably the fact that Alex gave Jim his first pair of shoes for Western States to run in some road flats. So with that, let's welcome our guest, Jim Walmsley, onto the show. Joining us from Flagstaff, Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Enjoying kind of some warmer weather rolling in right now. So couldn't be happier. How you guys doing?
Very good. We're good. I mean, we were talking off the show and trying to guess what your workout might have been today. So yeah. I don't know if either of us were right, but can you give us a little insight? What was the run today? Have you run so far?
Yeah, I ran. It's basically been my standard everyday run right now. It's about a 16-mile loop, and it goes up Eldon Lookout Trail, which is 2,400 feet of climbing and less than 2.5 miles. Really steppy. And then there's a couple options to get down from there. I usually take the road. Today I took a different trail, but yeah, so it ended up being 2 hours and 10 minutes, and kind of it's just a well-rounded little route.
So let me just, I want to make sure we hear this correct. So your normal everyday run right now is 15 to 16 miles with at least 23 to 2,400 feet of elevation gain.
Well, the one climb has that much. The route has about 3,000.
Sorry, that was my mistake.
So the 2,400 feet of gain in 2.5 miles is a beast. Oh my god.
Yeah, so if you guys come to Flag, that's probably my favorite one to take people out, because you go from 7,000 feet to 9,300 feet, and people die. So that's the one I still give Abdi Abneran a hard time, that I'll beat him up any day. Even if he beat me as an old man in the marathon.
Cool.
And I was gonna say, is this every day? So are we 15 to 16 miles a day times 7 days? Is that the mileage right now, or where are we at? What's this?
Yeah, it's the default. So far, I had like an off staggered stretch of, I did it 8 days in a row, just kind of for fun. But more or less, when I've done it Monday through Sunday, I've always had a day where I've cracked, and I just end up jogging like what I call buffalo loop, and it's 4-mile route from the house of just, I don't know. Sundays is just trying to keep it from getting to 0 on the day. And then in combination with biking a bit, I think last week I biked maybe about 14 hours. So getting in somewhere around 24 to 27 hours of work a week right now.
Nice. Not bad.
Still building.
Little more than me.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jim, I think I heard you just say still building. We'd like to, for our viewers, as of today, we're towards the end of April right now. Given what we know about COVID and race closures and things like that, what is the thing you're building towards right now? What is the race that you perceive that you are training for?
Yeah, so I think I got asked that. I ran into these random people out in the weird part of the mountain the other day, and I was like, are you guys lost or looking for something? And they're like, got talking a bit, and they're like, what are you training for? What race you got coming up? I'm like, nothing. There's like literally everything is wiped off that's organized. So I guess next weekend we're doing like this guy, John Menger. He's a race director from Northern California, now moved out to Sedona. We're doing kind of a weird COVID-19 May Day 50K race for fun in Sedona next weekend. But it's on your own. You just finish the route and you're not allowed to start or run with anyone. And so that's kind of a little interesting one, but I'll probably just do it as a training run. But more or less, I mean, kind of what's going through my head right now is I'm training to be really fit and really strong. So when the snow melts in Colorado and out in California and other places, I'll be really fit and ready to go train in the big mountains. And then in addition, maybe go after some fastest known times. So those don't involve any sort of race organization, any sort of coordinating with many other people. So that's a pretty cool part about our sport is you can pick a line or a loop or a route that goes through, whether it's roads or mountains or anything. It's kind of whatever you can create. You can establish what we call as a fastest known time over that route. And there's some really classic ones. One that I hold since 2016 is the Grand Canyon, running from rim to rim to rim, so double crossing of the Grand Canyon. That's one example of a fastest known time that people kind of frequently try to set records on.
So just to set the table here for some of the trail fans, we're under the impression that no Comrades, UTMB seems very TBD at this point. Well, so Comrades is technically postponed, it sounds like, correct?
Yeah, Comrades got postponed. I haven't really publicly talked too much about it, but I'll probably just scrap it for this year. I need a break from the roads. Like, train for the half marathon, the marathon, and kind of doing some road specific for that. And then, I don't know, I think I might have burned out if I continued to train on the roads for Comrades. So I'm kind of a little relieved.
Did you just break some people's hearts, Jim?
Well, I have plans to go back next year, but with it being postponed, it's going to conflict with the likes of UTMB, big mountain projects that you could potentially do, whether there are races or not. And kind of everything getting like quote unquote postponed or moved to the fall, basically like, well, what do you want to do now in the fall? So I've been kind of telling myself for a long time, especially if I get through Comrades, to like, your reward is going to be like, we're going to get back on the trails and it's going to be great. So I'm going to still do that. And then we'll just do the whole transition next year to get back into the roads. And yeah, after a break and some good free thinking in the mountains, we'll put together a plan to try to get back for Comrades and how that will look. But yeah, essentially it's still a down year next year. Usually they alternate years, up year and down years on Comrades. And so they call it Comrades Marathon, but it's a 55-mile road race in South Africa, and it's point to point. So one year is like positive, like 7,500 feet of climbing and 3,300 feet down. That's the uphill. And then down years, it's reverse. So this year is supposed to be down. Next year's an anniversary year, so they're trying to keep it down. So really it's just, it'll work better to reattack it next year, I think. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about trying to put a pack on and go through the mountains. I hate packs, but you got to learn to use them, learn to love them, and avoid the chafing, because you got to bring a lot of snacks on long trips.
Well, I'm curious, Jim. So now that, you're kind of in a weird gray area where there's no races are all TBD, and you're kind of you left to your own imagination at this point as to, like you said, lines, routes, FKTs, routes. Yeah. I'm curious to know, where has your imagination taken you over the last couple weeks when you see kind of this open, essentially these open couple months? I mean, what is a North Star kind of like, throw cares to the wind. Let's take a shot at that one.
Yeah.
That FKT route that's kind of always been on your radar, and now you might be able to do.
Yeah, so there's still a lot of prep that has to go into it, and I'm pretty far away from being ready for anything like one of these. But probably the one that I've hinted at the most so far is Tahoe Rim Trail. So it's a single track trail that circumnavigates Tahoe Lake, Lake Tahoe up in the Sierras. I think they're pretty close to record low snow this year. So that opens up a possibility of maybe so the record, I think Tim Tweetmeyer had it in 2005. He set it, and the trail was only completed in 2001. And Tim Tweetmeyer is this super ultra, I kind of call him Titan Tim. He finished Western States 25 times under 24 hours. And he's won it 5 times, I think. And he's just a absolute legend when it comes to Western States and showing up there. And he's still just in incredible shape. But he set it in 45 hours. Single lap around Tahoe is about 168 miles. And then Kilian Jornet came along in 2011 or 12. And I think he had plans to run John Muir Trail point to point, but he couldn't get the permit to go up Mount Whitney, I think is the story. So he changed plans and he ran Tahoe Rim Trail. And he reset the record. He broke it by 7 hours and ran 38 hours and change. And basically since 2011, no one's really come close to that. But I think a lot of people see Kilian's name on it and pretty discouraged about that's one of the harder ones now. So yeah, so for me, that excites me and interests me. And then I love going out to Tahoe. I'm used to going out to that area every summer for June in Western States the last 5 years. So it's a good excuse to head out that way. Usually, so Tim Tweetmeyer said it in August. Kilian said it in September. So usually it's a late year FKT, but with the low snowfall, there's a possibility that we could pull the trigger a bit earlier. A little more daylight too, so that's good.
Nice. So not that you're etching it in stone, but it sounds like a tentative FKT search or attempt sometime late summer. And then, I mean, as far as what's your perspective on? I mean, everyone's going to want to know UTMB status. Where do you think that's at the moment?
I don't know. So one thing that's probably something to watch too is the Tour de France got rescheduled for the same time frame. So I imagine if that goes off, UTMB should be able to go off. But I don't know. I think still a lot of people think Tour de France going off in the end of August, September is still pretty ridiculous and not going to happen. I think one of the rumors I've heard is ideas of or just other races are doing things from just staggered starts and you're racing time wise kind of that way to elites only to just trying to figure out ways. I think even I wouldn't be surprised if there's regional restrictions, so you have to live within a certain distance of a certain race to be able to race it, to just limit traveling and contamination that way. So but yeah, I have no idea about UTMB, and it's still far enough away that there's something that could always change tomorrow, and basically make it safe for everybody to come out, but not really right now and not for the foreseeable future. So I have no idea.
Well, we had a little time. I think all of us are waiting on the status of events. So we are. We're all part of that
all the
club.
major marathons are during that time too. So they'll all either be able to go off, or probably you'll start seeing them all cancel again.
Yeah. Well, I know we'll have questions about more about how you're prepping for these things, how you're kind of attacking this time, but I want to take a step back because I've run most of my life. I know I've run a trail race. I know people that run trail. I know who Jim Walmsley is, Kilian Jornet, all these people. But when I thought about our talk with you, and I've listened to talks that you've had, it also opens up the realization that I don't actually know a lot of the specifics of this world. And I'm going to go out and assume I'm like a lot of average people that are into running and know what trail running is, but they don't really know all the details. So my first question is just, what are the disciplines, right? And you hear ultra running, you hear mountain running, you hear trail running. Are those three different things, or is it all the same? Are those it? Is there more? Like what?
I would say,
does the sport break down?
Yeah. I would say there's more categories, but there's also tons of overlap with all sorts of them. So there's all sorts of blurred lines. I think a lot of people generalize it into mountain, ultra, and trail. But ultra is technically just based off the distance. And then you get into the distinguishing trail versus mountain, and a mountain's going to have a lot more vert, but then none of that includes like how technical things are. So, and then in addition, you can have like weather is one of the biggest things that I think plays a big factor of the sport too, whether you're running in the summer in Western states or you're doing a winter route on like one of the rounds in England. Those are two drastically different preparations you're going to need to do, because one, you're going to be slogging through wintry snow mix, mud, and then the other one, you need to basically be ready to cook in an oven for a long time and be able to run through it. Yeah, I find it fascinating because I think there's just so many different disciplines, and it also allows, I think, for the sport to have so many different kind of superstars in it. There's not necessarily someone that's going to be able to do absolutely everything top down and win everything. Like you don't really see Kilian going after a 100K road record or dipping down into a proper marathon. At the same time, you don't see Francois Dain, who's probably the most successful mountainous 100-miler in the world. You don't really see him having great success in 50Ks or anything that gets too fast. Things need to kind of slow down, but that guy can hike like I've never seen someone. So, and there's really big advantages to that, because all of a sudden you slow things down, your heart rate goes down, you can eat. So yeah, it's some form of pacing, but then you get into like, you're seeing some of these backyard ultras, which are like 4-mile loop, and they go off every hour. That's its own crazy little world that's evolving really rapidly right now, and multi-day stuff. And then you start diving into what could be through hiking, whether it's the Appalachian Trail or Pacific Crest Trail, or I don't know. It's a slippery slope every direction you go. So I think it keeps you really busy. It's really good for ADD people like me, and there's always something to chase. And once you accomplish that thing, you're going to turn your direction somewhere else, and someone else will nip it over there, and you'll never be done. So there's always something to do.
So you said mountain running and trail running. The difference really becomes the vertical element. Where is that threshold where one becomes, changes to the other?
It's probably a matter of opinion. I don't think there's a defined point. So what you call a mountain, I might call a trail. What I call a mountain.
Well, let's hear what you call the differentiator, like when you're day to day.
Well, I would say if you do it in an ultra distance, you'll be hiking. Because if you run every single one of them, you're going to drop out of the race, because you're going to be like too tired to go over the next one. So if you could imagine that, but if that's when it gets really exciting and really athletic, when you take it to like a 30K distance. So Sierra Zinal is a mountain race, but it's kind of run on a trail. But in the first 10K, you climb 6,500 feet. And it's just straight up for so long. And then you get to about 7,500 feet elevation, and you get these rolly things that you're supposed to rip, but you're completely out of gas. And then the last 3 miles, you drop maybe like 1,500 feet per mile. So it's a really tricky race that's a lot of fun. But it's completely runnable, technically. But how steep it is, makes it a mountain. So I don't know. I'd say like 700-800 feet per mile gets to be pretty steep.
Got it. And what about you mentioned the technical aspects. Explain that part, right? And maybe your experience in this, because I would assume when you started, that has to be an area where you have to improve, right? I mean, running a 3K versus a 3K steeple is probably like running an easy trail versus a really technical trail, right?
A little bit. Transition from a 3K to a 3K steeple is probably a lot easier than transition to like a really technical race.
I was dumbing it down.
I'm pretty lucky that like I think I do pretty well in the transition, and especially when you kind of maybe compare Americans on a global scale, I've probably done a lot better with the descending aspect and the technical part of it than most do. But it also goes to like, it's not until sometimes I bring someone new onto the trails and they're like tippy toeing around stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we're running this way. And like, they're just like, you're just dragging them along. And people have different comfort abilities on the trail and they're afraid to roll an ankle. And I mean, rolling ankles and falling definitely is a part of it that you kind of don't think about much of, and happens, you get up, keep going again. But technical could be like muddy, it could be rocky, but then there's all sorts of different types of rock. There's shale, there's scree fields, there's what you call baby heads. They're like these little things where you can't really step on any of them, because anytime you step on one, they all roll and then your ankle rolls. That's what we have a lot of here in northern Arizona. But then you get like really rocky where all the rocks are in the ground, and that's kind of fun because then like the rocks are your friends and sometimes they're the best things to plant on. It can be tough when you're running through like 12 inches of snow. I've had that in races. Sometimes you got to run through like little rivers or creeks that are a couple feet deep. Running with wet feet is a skill. Like, I hate it. And you just got to get comfortable with just soggy, heavy shoes, and it is what it is, and you just keep slogging it out.
So when you're getting ready for these, you know, and you're talking about the different kinds of rocks and all this, you know, I'm thinking of specificity maybe when a marathoner is getting ready for a certain marathon course, a hilly course versus a fast course, whatever. How specific are you getting in your training to get ready for the different types of, you know, things like rocks or surfaces? Are you traveling to places with that kind of rock to train on it, or are you staying?
The rocks in my backyard don't change a whole lot, so I just kind of have what I have. And first and foremost, I worry about my fitness. Secondly, I would say again, like naturally, I adapt pretty well to that sort of stuff. Minus, I hate mud. I don't think I do very good in mud. But maybe, I don't know. I just try to avoid it. But for the most part, it probably depends if you have like really bad weaknesses. So if you're a really great runner, but you suck on a certain type of terrain, and then you're going to go do a race like that, you're probably setting yourself up to struggle a lot, and probably not do as well as you want if you have a weakness that overlaps with the course you're going to do. So if you find that you kind of suck at something, you should probably focus on getting a little better on that. But sometimes it's tough to replicate those things. I mean, another example too that makes it a lot harder is a lot of European races, like starting right before nighttime. So you start without a headlight, and then you got to either pull a headlight out of your pack or pick one up at an aid station. And then you start running through the whole night. And I don't train a lot at night and with the headlight, and that's something that I need to embrace and probably take a month or two to just like be nocturnal and start just banging out like 4 or 5 hour runs with a headlight and some wizard sticks and marching around the mountains. And it's just like knowing where you put your jacket in your packet or your pack. And sometimes too, like I've had it where like I dial in my pack pretty good, and then all of a sudden, like by the time you're like ready and you're trained, you're like, man, my pack is just falling apart. I need a new one. You get a new one, whether it's from a sponsor, you go buy one, and all of a sudden it fits completely different. You're getting chafing where you weren't getting chafing, and this, yeah, I don't know. There's all sorts of weird issues with it. And then at the end of the day, sometimes I just think it gets down to you're in ultra running. If it's a far enough race, you got to learn to just suffer and be okay, and like ignore that just your collarbone's bleeding is like, well, it's not going to change over the next 20 hours. So get used to it and quit whining about it. Yeah, just enjoy where you're at and find the fun in the process and just keep grinding away.
Jim, I'm curious, we just kind of touched on how, people who try to categorize, the sport. I'm curious to what you think, maybe people who are in the trail world, people who follow UTMB, people who follow Western States, people who follow, sky racing and things like that. How do you think that they categorize you? Where do you fall? And then, as you mentioned a little bit ago, there's people who have weaknesses and avoid some races that might play to those weaknesses. Based on how people categorize you and how you categorize yourself, what is a race that would be your weakness? What are the elements that would be a little daunting to you to pick up, other than that night running?
Well, right now, TRT really interests me because I think extending my range into past 100 miles, and really, I think you need to look at it time-wise, not necessarily distance-wise, because Western States and UTMB are really, really different. One's I've made it a 14 and a half hour race. And all of a sudden that's a runner's race. Where UTMB, there's a lot of hiking, there's a lot of temperature changes, and you're out there for about 20 hours, probably no matter what. I don't know. I have certain ideas of like, I'd like to try to send that one a little more and run a lot more of the course, but with 33,000 feet of up and down, so 66,000 feet of elevation change total. Or compare it to like if you've ever gone rock climbing and you get your forearms get pumped. It's like that, but it's your whole quadriceps and your hamstrings and your glutes. Like you are completely pumped, but you got still 20-30 miles with 10,000 feet of climbing left. And it's just like, at that point you might say like, might have been a mistake to try running the whole thing at that point. And that's where you get into a bit of the hiking. Hiking's a little bit of a weakness maybe, and slowing things down, being more patient with it. So longer time hiking, a bit slower. And then I kind of avoid races with a lot of heat and humidity. I don't mind the heat. I really like the heat, but I'm a good sweater, and like all of a sudden humidity I think you just need to slow down. I don't know. I think something really rugged in the Southeast or other parts of the world could just be brutal. And then weakness too could just be things you neglect. So probably ultra runners get stereotyped the most for being slower. Probably, in my opinion, it's usually because you can just kind of neglect the speed workouts, and it really doesn't matter if you can run a 4:20 mile or a 4-minute mile. Really, if you drop a 4-minute mile at Western States, it's probably a lot worse than it is better. You're just going to pay it back so much harder. So you never really want to go that fast. So it's more about finding a good rhythm at a fast pace rather than finding like the fastest pace, which is a bit different than the track. The track, if you can run a 4-minute mile and a 5K, you might set yourself up for something interesting. Maybe not. It's still long enough where you can find yourself maybe walking the home stretch. But things are really versatile. So depending on what you're training, you can have a weakness at one time that is a strength at another. But again, you can tweak your training a bit to, like, just when I transitioned from going from the road marathon to back to Western States, or like, I guess 2019 was a good example because I ran a half marathon in January and I ran 64 flat, which those speed workouts just totally kicked my butt. And it was like really depressing of like, man, these like would have been just gimme workouts back in college, and just the speed's killing me. But able to pull it off, but then you transition straight back into some ultra longer stuff, and training is completely different for Western States. And then all of a sudden, when I switched back to some speed running again, to do a half marathon again, like the workouts were clicking a lot more this year than they were the year before. So like kind of what was a bigger weakness the year before wasn't as much of a weakness. And now I've gone back to neglecting the speed workouts because I just don't enjoy them. And like, I don't like showing up at the track by myself, or measuring out distances with a little wheel and putting some cones down before I go warm up. Like, just roll your eyes like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah, I don't know. I think with trail running, like if you got into some faster trail stuff, like, so I always think 50Ks, runnable 50Ks are always dangerous for really ultra runners, like people that do 50-mile, 100-mile stuff, because all of a sudden 50K, and especially something runnable, you're going to get in someone that's doing speed workouts, that's doing the fast long runs, that's doing basically marathon training. And it's not a technical enough trail to really slow people down. So all of a sudden they're just going to have gears and just outrun you. So I always think the 50K is kind of a good distance to avoid for the most part. I know getting ready for the US Marathon trials in February, I did a 50K. That was kind of fun because it was a 50K down in Fountain Hills, and I think it had maybe 16 or 1700 feet of 1700 feet of climbing over 30 miles. I think the course was a little short, but it was kind of fun because I finally had some of that leg speed to like really rip a fun 50K, and I think I came through in like 2:49 for the race. So that's not bad. Yeah, it was like around 5:30 pace.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you know, we started to talk about, you know, the categories and like things in which you start scaling things as far as distance. You know, you start to get to these places where you're like starting to talk about like Tahoe Trail, John Muir Trail, Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail. So you strike me as someone who's rather analytical and kind of feeds off of those splits. And I'm wondering, based on your recent training, you're ripping 64 half marathons. Has that?
I got down to 63.
It's okay. So you're a sub 64 guy. So you're a sub 64 guy who, I'm just wondering, like, has that shifted your perception when you start to extrapolate? Because you clearly do extrapolate what your perceptions of your limits are. How far have you taken that? Has that marathon training changed the way kind of your, I guess, the algorithm that you use to extrapolate over farther races? Has that shifted the perception, A? And B, how far have you taken that? And by far, I mean like distance.
So I think the leg speed stuff can apply to some races, and then other races it's just irrelevant, and it's probably more of a distraction that's not helping. So if you do something like races I've done, or the two biggest US 50-mile races would be Lake Sonoma 50-mile, and then I think they started canceling like indefinitely forever the North Face 50-mile, but that one's usually in like November, December. But both are really notable for being fast, runnable sort of stuff. And like when you're going down, they're a bit rolling hills, nothing technical about the races. And when you're going downhill, you can just absolutely rip them. And you're going like in a 50-mile race, I'll be clicking a couple of the miles downhill under 5-minute pace. but effort wise, it's not necessarily the same. But then it also like, if you're not trained strength wise and endurance wise, like those will also just rip your legs apart by the end of it. But the leg speed lets you kind of really bomb some descent. So I call it like just a magic trick thing when you got that sort of leg speed, because you can just drop a move and all of a sudden you're gone. And once you gap someone, then things become a bit interesting too, because how you got to pace the race by yourself, which I think a lot of people make more mistakes when they're pacing by themselves compared to pacing with a pack. When you're with a pack, you can kind of feel out the other guys and what might be good and bad. The marathon, half marathon stuff, I think would apply if I wanted to stay in that 50K runnable stuff in that trail world. And I would call it like the Joe Gray, Andy Wacker kind of niche that those guys are still really sharp. They can still hop in a half marathon and click a pretty good time and transition straight back into their trail races that are moving really fast. So like if I'm training for Western States and I were to hop into a race with one of those guys, like more than likely I'm not going to do so well. But then all of a sudden, if I start training for the half marathon and the marathon, I think I hold my own just fine. So it kind of depends what you want to set up. Once you get into Ultra Trail Mont Blanc is kind of a good example of one that's slowing down long enough. Trends Gran Canaria is like a 13-14 hour race, but it's got enough vertical climbing and stuff. That's pretty tough. You talk about Hong Kong 100K. It's all on steps, and it's like, well, how good are you at running steps? And we're talking concrete steps, and it's insane. So, I don't know. There's so much diversity to it.
Jim, I question for you around just how, talking about these prepping for this stuff and how your mind thinks. In terms of your training and how you do it, you and correct me if I'm wrong, you're still self-coached.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of that for you, and on the opposite end, what are maybe the downfalls of that? And then is there anyone that you use as an advisor to bounce ideas off of?
Yeah. So I'd say the biggest, like probably pro and con, is just you get to be an idiot. You get to go do like dumb training. And for me, I guess if I do put myself in a box, I would say I'm volume based. So I love banging out really big mileage, and not necessarily like 150 mile weeks per se, but like 140, 150 mile weeks with 30, 40, 50,000 feet of vertical. Now you're talking 25 to 35 hours a week, which is a lot different than doing 140 miles on the roads at a much faster pace or something like that. They're different stimulus with them. As far as bouncing ideas off of stuff, whether it's, like try to read stuff online and pick up tidbits here and there. But for the most part, what I think is kind of cool about ultra running is I say it's more of an art form, where track and marathoning is more of a science. You just kind of got to feel it a bit more. Otherwise, you'll end up sticking to the script and probably overtrain and show up and not do so great. So I think a lot of it has to do with learning kind of the feedback with your body and the ebbs and flows, and knowing, I think a lot of the people I bounce ideas off of is the other guys I train with here in Flagstaff. We call our little group the Coconino Cowboys. But it's got other guys that are just like trying to do the dumb stuff I am, with like Cody Reed, Tim Frericks, both went to NAU, ran there. Jared Hazen started doing ultras before he was 18, and like I think at 18 or 19 he's like started competing competitively at Western States, and he's taken second and third there now since. We got Eric Sensman, who's maybe bring some rationale to the group and like, maybe you guys are overdoing it, because I've done pretty good just doing this. And then we got Stephen Kirsch, who's kind of coming more from the traditional running background, running at University of Portland and Georgetown. So kind of a mix of people. But I think the similarity would be that we're all trying to push distance and try to go out for a bit longer days, and then the camaraderie of like talking about some of the bunks you've had in training. And I guess what I was going to touch on too is like, I joke that there's always a boomerang in training, because you just hit ebbs and flows. And when you're feeling good, if you just chuck that boomerang too hard, it's going to come straight back for you and basically just knock you off your feet for a couple days. But then you get a good laugh about it of like, oh yeah, that one, it's hitting me right now, because I'm just like, I can't even get out the house. You're just buried in training. But it's kind of reassuring to know, like, sometimes when I'm like just struggling to get out the door because I've maybe had a couple good runs like a week ago, but right now it's like I'm paying it back. I see Jared Hazen, my roommate, going through the same things and the ebbs and flows, and it's just kind of over time it just turns into a chuckle of like, yeah, you'll get through it, you're fine. But then it's really about like finding the timing and pulling all the strings together at the right time for the race day and showing up and trying to replicate good performances that most of us have been lucky enough to have at this point, and kind of confidence in some of the routes we do around here and the times we hit, of like, if you know you've hit it once or twice in training pretty close, you kind of know you're clicking and you're doing pretty well.
So when was the last time that you actually had to reach out to a quote unquote coach who's actually working with athletes regularly, and who was it, and why did you find yourself reaching out to them?
Nah, I'm pretty bad about asking for help. That's probably another one of my weaknesses. I probably should have reached out.
Was it college? Was it?
Yeah, I think it was college was the last time. I mean, so when I first got into ultra running, I was kind of trying to work with a friend from high school that had kind of I kind of learned about ultra running a little bit when I was in high school, but thought it was just the dumbest thing ever. And then I kind of reconnected with him after I got out of the Air Force and as I was getting into some ultra running stuff. But it also kind of went to like, I felt a bit of a disconnect of like, I've gone to college, I've done these workouts and stuff, like the fitness I'm coming at this stuff with is just a little bit different than maybe what you're suggesting and stuff. So I didn't necessarily click with that, and it was trying to help out. And but yeah, I would say like for the most part, the last time I've had formal coaching has been college. I'm pretty probably self-motivated, and so I kind of get in a habit of goal setting a race out there, setting something out there. I guess in this day and age, it's kind of looking forward to moving in some big routes in the mountains. So trying to just get strong and fit. I'd say it's a general fitness right now with nothing specific yet, but knowing that I need to build up to be able to do some longer runs a lot more efficiently than what I'm able to do right now. So, yeah, I don't know. Most of us aren't really using coaches. So, I don't know. You know, in the group, you're going to catch a lot of grief if you're slacking too much. So we're pretty lucky that we keep each other accountable.
Well, it sounds like it's a good crew. And it's good to obviously have some folks that you can bounce ideas off of, try things, see how everyone's responding to it. I
also have like 1,000 coaches on letsrun.com, so that helps a lot too.
Do you take that stuff to heart? Is there any of it that you actually listen to?
No. It's usually just rambling garbage, but it's funny. Some people I'm like even if they're like, oh, this guy's just completely overdoing it, I'll be in like the middle of a block of like, I'm completely overdoing it, and like but it's like, oh, I gotta fake through it and get through it and pull things together, otherwise they're gonna know. But no, not really. Like, there's no secret.
I'm curious, Jim. It's almost like the volume you're doing and the metrics you're starting to put out and the goals that you're going for are they're pretty unprecedented. So it's almost like, how could somebody have the and I don't want to speak for you, but it's almost like, how could somebody have the audacity to reach out to you and think that they knew better when so few people have ever seen anyone operating on this level? It's almost like like you could piss off, like you've never operated in the realm that I'm seeking.
Well, I think one of the good things we see in the group is that, like, my friends aren't just seeing like highlights and this and that. They get to see me just completely sunken into the couch and like just buried in it. So and I would say, like, one of the benefits of a coach in the past too has been like, they hold you back and they keep you fresh and they keep you like kind of at that optimal level, where not having a coach, I've always been curious about, like, what if I try a little more? To the same extent though, like, have been times where I go like, oh, this is plenty, like this sucks. So I think you really got to listen to how kind of easily aggravated you get. I think that's one of the early signs of overreaching a bit, is getting a little more edgy. Because through it, whether you're feeling good or not, you'll probably be tired. So that's not necessarily that relevant. But probably your attitude and some other indicators, whether it's like, I mean, probably sex drive is a big indicator too, that people probably don't talk a lot about, but it's kind of funny. And it's like, yeah, if you're not really feeling up for much, and you're just getting edgy and pissed off easily, it's probably pushing a little too hard. So kind of non-running indicators are probably best to listen to. But I don't know. It's all fun. I mean, there's a lot of learning experience. I think, again, it goes back to ultra runnings. A lot of us are just making it up as we go, maybe. But yeah. Well, I guess, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think I'm curious to know. You mentioned your body's giving you different triggers here and there. I'm curious, because you've operated at these kind of crazy high levels. What is you mentioned the sex drive thing, but is there any other like bizarre, like non like typical runner symptoms that you've encountered that have like flared up and you like couldn't put a finger on it, but you could maybe link back to just cranking up the mileage too quick?
Well, a lot of times it's in retrospect. So it's like when a race doesn't necessarily go right, and all of a sudden things didn't go perfect, those are probably where you look back and you analyze it. And a lot of times when I have, it's been like, well, I probably overdid it. Your super restlessness. Yeah, it could be a sex drive. It could be you're grouchy at everybody. I noticed, like, probably my biggest overtraining time was 2018 before UTMB. It was like when I was tapering, just nothing came back. And I usually do July out in the mountains and I just camp. But it's also a little harder lifestyle. And it's harder to eat enough at that time. So I think I lost a lot of weight, but I wasn't weighing myself, but I could kind of see, like, I was a lot skinnier than I should have been at that time.
What does that mean? What does that mean for Jim Walmsley at that time? What, like, if you had to estimate,
I don't even know.
Weight?
My weight was probably around 135, I would guess. But I probably should have been on.
You're 5'11" or so? How tall are you?
About 6, like just a hair over 6 foot. So that's definitely skinny. I probably operate a lot better around just over 140 to 142. I feel a lot healthier. Training, I'll be on the 142, 143 side. Sometimes race-wise, that's where, like, I try not to weigh myself, because then it just gets in your head and all of a sudden you think you have to hit a certain weight. So, like,
It's another
I don't
number in
pull
your
a
life.
scale out much. Yeah. Like if you feel fit, you feel ready, just go get it. Like you don't need you don't need a scale to tell you you're fit. Like you can look at your watch and go like, oh yeah, I'm ready to roll. And just you take away from like your effort levels on the certain routes you're doing too. Like, so if we run we call it the Cowboy Loop in the Grand Canyon, but it's a 21-mile route that goes down Bright Angel, up South Kaibab, and then back on the rim. I mean, if you can run that around 2 hours and 50 minutes and like you're closing pretty hard on the last 4.5 miles up at the top of the canyon, and you're driving home, not necessarily blown out and super tired, and just another day at the office, like you're probably in pretty good space for an ultra.
Jim, the and talking about just kind of this drive and this training and the amount you do,
I guess I will note real quick that the other guys in the group don't necessarily do that much, or as much as I do. I would say the only other guy that's really pushing things pretty crazy is Jared. The other guys find that they overtrain a little more easily.
Got it.
But okay, sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No, you're good. So I'm curious just to know, like, you're not just with training, but the races. You've said that you like to throw out big goals. It's fun. It's fun to go after big goals. It's like big. There's big risk, big reward. Where did that start? Like, where do you first remember being that kind of athlete?
At least running wise, I mean, well, growing up, like, I grew up playing soccer pretty competitively, and like the goal was always just like, yeah, I want to play soccer professionally, and like I want to be a pro athlete. But then I think in high school things changed a bit, and like I started to discover running and cross country in high school, and just became like I like that group of friends a lot better, and I would say it didn't quite have the same edge that maybe a more contact sport has, but it first started with like getting into it with friends, and then probably the first big goal running wise was trying to make Foot Locker nationals when I was in high school. I think when I was a freshman in high school, so I guess going back, kind of one of the answers when people ask me like who was one of the first or most inspirational runners you had like when you were growing up, is probably you guys know this name, Kenny Cormier, is always kind of my funny answer to it, because I was a freshman in high school and got to see him just come out of left field and just like throw down these mega miles, and just come out of nowhere in like Douglas, Arizona. Like, I mean, most Arizonans can't point at that in a map. So it was pretty cool and inspirational to see that and just kind of see hard work pay off like that. And yeah, it was always kind of a goal in high school to make Foot Locker. I didn't really have any track goals, anything like that. I think I learned a lot more in college once I got there, which there's probably a little regret as a high schooler not doing enough research of looking ahead. And as a high school, I wouldn't have been able to tell you any competitive times for someone running in college or professionally. But I would have been able to rattle off everything about like prep high schoolers at the time. But there wasn't much foresight past that. So things have constantly evolved for me. So each stage, like you get to college and then all of a sudden like get caught up with trying to run certain times, and you just, I would say it was a big shock to get into college and just like, people are running what? Like, and then in addition, I felt like probably my age, maybe everyone feels like this, but it's like everyone, all the times just kept getting faster and faster every single year. Of like, well, my goal was just to break 14 minutes for the 5K, because that should have got me in the indoor nationals. And then like, well, guess what? You're 25th on the list. Like, you're not going. So where like 4 years ago, that probably would have put you in a national sort of thing. So things are always constantly changing. So I think making your goals and stuff adaptable. So then it gets into learning about trail running. And like one of the first big races I ever heard of was Western States. And it's like, well, hell, I want to go win that. And then people are like, who are you? Like, you're crazy. Of like, you don't even know what you're talking about. And it's like, and even in retrospect now, it's like, yeah, I had no idea what I was talking about, but I knew I wanted to go do that. And I think when you, whether it's like qualifying for Foot Locker in high school or trying to run certain like time goals in college, or trying to win Western States, like when you really put everything you have behind something, I think special things can happen and people are going to love the story regardless. So I think everyone as a human can kind of appreciate just people putting everything that they have into stuff and putting their emotions and like just really focusing on trying to make something happen. And it goes to like kind of the saying of the process, not the outcome of just putting everything behind it is pretty cool.
Nice.
Jim, I'd love to kind of piggyback off that answer. One thing I've noticed about, not only do you seem just intrinsically motivated to an infinite degree, but one thing I think that feels like separates you from others is your ability to return to places or moments where you failed. When I think about, when we think about when we talk about Western, like the first two journeys, bombed out hard, took a wrong turn, got dropped out. And then, even we talk about UTMB, racing that again, there's been hard days there. So I'm curious, it almost seems like although there has been failure and there's been like scary moments, you somehow don't even, it's like you don't even register the fear, or do you, and you don't let it on?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like one of the sayings of like the definition of stupidity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome of like, that basically sounds like my strategy. I don't know. I think, and it's not like I necessarily attacked Western States in 2018 much different than I did in 2016, but all of a sudden like experience and year after year of being healthy and doing the same thing kind of starts adding on top of each other, and all of a sudden you get a little bit more of an edge, or on race day maybe you avoid some certain traps, or you kind of notice paying attention to your stomach a little more and making sure that you don't upset it and basically just destroy your stomach, which is going to potentially destroy your race. So some of that's just experience and thinking that you're not going to make the same mistakes again. I don't know. It sounds like you just defined my strategy, and it sounds a lot like stupid.
Well, I gotta say, one of my favorite moments is I think it was the second year you did it, and I think it was the Light My Fire series on YouTube where there's a moment where you're at Forest Hill, and it feels like the nausea is really coming in, and everybody's filming you throw up, right? And Sensman is right there, and he's got his hand on your back, he's rubbing your back, and he says, you just barf out everything, and he just goes, "You ever done that before?" And you matter of factly just go, "No," but you continue to march on, which was just like such an endearing moment, I thought. And I think it's fascinating how you just kept coming back though, and it feels like, again, it feels like almost an analytical extrapolation, like you're constantly refreshing the algorithm to break this kind of puzzle that was now the Western States course and the Western States record. I'd love to ask, now that you've busted it twice, the record, and you finished it twice, you've broken it twice, you had a great year last year in great conditions. Correct. Sorry, the first year you did finish as well. So you finished 3 times. You've broken the record twice now. Last year, perfect conditions, essentially. I'd love to know, and again, coming back to our new extrapolation question, now that you have X fitness in the marathon, that Western States record, is it safe? how often do you think about it, and how do you analyze it now?
So I think it's really, really weather dependent. If you get a perfect cool year, which I think when Timmy Olsen ran it, it was still another 10 degrees cooler. And then even when Kilian won it, it was still like 3 degrees cooler. So there's definitely better days. I know it's kind of funny because one of the rumors I heard was that Western States was thinking about putting it in the fall, and I was like, oh hell no! Like, there's no way I'm not gonna run a fall Western States because like they're like 10 guys are gonna break the time because it's not necessarily the distance and the course that necessarily crushes you. I'm probably most proud of the race in 2018 because the high that day was like recorded as 98 degrees, and I think it's like tied for like maybe the 7th hottest year out of 45 years. So it was a pretty honest, hot Western States year, and to break the course record that year was pretty cool. As far as the overall course record, yeah, someone will come along and beat it. I think I'll take a couple more cracks at it. Whether I'll get another, you definitely need a really good day weather-wise to go after that. And I think if people go after it on a hot day, yeah, it's going to make for some good spectating because it's not going to end well. It's better to pace it in the heat. So most years it'll probably be safe, but yeah, every few years a special year comes along, and that's when you'll really find out how tough it is. But yeah, if people want to go attack it and the high is over 100 degrees, so the high in 2018 was 98, but down in the canyons it's probably more like over 115, and there's just like these rocks radiating heat on you. So like what they take as a recorded high is not even near how hot it is, because down in the river it's like yeah, it's boiling. So you got to get used to that.
I'm curious to, you chat about, if in the fall, if they hosted it in the fall, even more people would come out. And we talk about categorizing runners and people having weaknesses, but I wonder, if we pull everything away and we put everybody on, let's say, a Western course, I wonder how, why it's so, why you have seen so much success on that course, and B, I guess, who do you think could threaten it? I've heard, Joe Gray went on the, Billy Yang podcast and said, if I focused on Western States for 6 months, I could win it. And I'm curious to hear your reaction to that, because it's almost like if you're in the race and Joe is in the race, you better come if you're going to come at the king, you better not miss.
No, I don't think Joe would do so good there. So I think in general, one of the most important things with ultra running, and it goes back to motivation, is just why is Joe out there? If Joe's out there to prove that he's just faster than me, he's probably going to crack and not finish, because that's not a real great reason to be out there. If he finds a self-motivation to be like, hell yeah, I think this race is great, this is like something I want to be good at, yeah, he's got all sorts of running potential. I don't know how Joe does in the heat. Who knows how Joe does at mile 60, let alone mile 80. And then like what happens when you're running that much downhill? There's a lot of question marks with that, but I mean, yeah, he's a great runner and he's got all sorts of potential with it. He's extrapolating a lot, which is usually way off target. But I think it'd be interested to see like when he did the podcast, because that was probably before the World Mountain Running Champs this last year. And I think Joe probably walked away seeing me run the longer distance course there. And it was a pretty good day for me. So probably walks away going, oh, maybe it'd be a little harder to do that. And then, I mean, I think we both lined up for a half marathon on the same day. I think Houston was the same day, and he lined up for Houston. Like, he was a couple minutes. I think he was like, wasn't under 65 minutes. So it's like, well, if you think you're faster, like, well, at least that day you were a couple minutes slower. So like, where are you going to get the time? But I think it's dangerous in ultra running for people to come in and just assume that Eliud Kipchoge is going to go and run 12 hours there. Because again, if he's not real motivated to be there, it's a lot more fun just to run to Forest Hill than to run all the way to Auburn. So yeah, you got to have really good motivation and a good backbone of the answer of like why you're there and stuff. It's not always like easy to define exactly what that is, but at the same time, the question will keep resurfacing. So you at least got to be hungry as hell and motivated on race day.
Jim, I gotta keep you honest here. You know, you just a few moments ago, you were like, I came out, I heard of Western States, I said, hey, that's a good one. I'm gonna go after and win that thing. and so okay. it's like it's almost like Joe is now almost has that same attitude. Like he's like, oh, I want to go beat that guy, or whatever it is.
So,
but so now you sound like an elder Jim Walmsley now.
Yeah. So I would say something interesting though is like a lot of ultra runners have like weird quirks or gone through depression or weird times in their lives and stuff. I would say one of my biggest motivating factors, especially like first getting into ultra running, is basically like I had just gotten kicked out of the Air Force. I like was screwing up when I was active duty Air Force and didn't really have a good career, and just got like at 25 years old, just kicked on the curb and like, well, what are you going to do with your life now? I think that set me up really well in the ultra world, because all of a sudden it just gave me like an ability to just go after a big dream like that and a big goal. In my opinion at the time, it was like the lowest I ever felt. And I struggled with my own personal depression during that time. And it was like basically one of the best things that could have happened to me, because it just kind of freed me to go after goals that I hadn't imagined or hadn't probably would have thought was stupid if I had things going better in my life or this or that. And basically it just set me on a completely different trajectory that aligned really well with good qualities that you need in ultra running. That would be, I'd say, what was going on in my life that maybe helped kickstart of even why I started trail running in the first place, of just a mental break to leave my phone at home and just go somewhere, and trying to go to a waterfall or a lake or a mountaintop. And basically I got a hiking book and I just wanted to knock out the most difficult hikes and stuff when I was up living in Montana. So it was a pretty cool place to start doing that. But yeah, there was kind of a nothing to lose attitude when I first started ultra running. It's kind of like when I was getting into the marathon of like, yeah, you're trying to surprise people and do this and that. But, when the marathon got tough in February, like I wasn't really that tough, because probably the motivation wasn't aligned properly for that race. And I think one of the disappointments with that was I didn't feel like I was my toughest version. And at the end of the day, maybe I'm just not in love with the marathon like I am Western States. So Western States, I find them pretty tough. So for whatever reason, that's kind of been my race that I've definitely owned an identity towards before I ever had any success with it. So the other thing about it is like, well, does Joe Gray want to take 3 years to try to get it right too? Like, what happens if the first year doesn't go right? Like, you don't get another chance till next year. So again, the motivation's got to be strong to do it.
Jim, I'm curious. You kind of alluded to the separation from the Air Force as being that kind of that precipice and kind of that accelerator to this life. Have you ever considered what life would be like if you had stayed? Yeah. Would you still be active duty? Would we be looking at Captain Walmsley at this point?
Would we not be on this podcast?
Let me see. No, we wouldn't. I mean, upper body wise, I was like bigger in college and bigger in the Air Force for one. About the same weight, but I'd say muscularly, like my chest and shoulders were definitely a lot more built out. Doing push-ups and pull-ups pretty regularly. But yeah, I think, what would I do it. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm in the 1% club in a bad way. I was a second lieutenant and I never got promoted to first lieutenant. And they say it's like a 99.9 promotion rate. I'm in that 0.1 club. Not in a good thing, but yeah. I guess theoretically, if everything was going good, I'd at least be a captain. Maybe looking to get promoted, like go through a majors board and get promoted to major. About this time, yeah. Because graduated in 2012, so it'd be 8 years. Yeah, that'd be pretty quick if you're going up to major. I think 7, I think, is about as quick as you'll go. So, but more or less, I wouldn't have the time for it. Running 3 hours a day doesn't take care of itself. Like, you got to get out the door and make it, and it's pretty exhausting to do a lot of other stuff during the day. It's challenging. When I was active duty Air Force, I was probably more in this realm of, I had leftover fitness from college and I could go out for, I'd say at like the next 2-3 years, I could get off the couch and go run a 108, 109 half marathon, I'd say. And like that fitness really stayed around for a bit. I mean, being in the Air Force, you got to be somewhat active and still make fitness standards. So that kind of kept me residual fitness, encouraging that. But I definitely would say like I didn't train well. I'd go on like maybe 2-3 weeks of good running of like 80 miles a week, and then all of a sudden 3 weeks of no running, and then maybe a couple weeks on the bike, or it was more random and trying to just figure out what I wanted to do after like college track life, and knowing that being a professional runner wasn't a viable career, and chasing that dream, like basically the dream was over. But then kind of getting separated from the Air Force, kind of at 25 years old, it was done before it was supposed to be. I did about 3 years in active duty Air Force, and it was supposed to be a 5-year commitment till 2017. So, definitely changed the trajectory of my life for sure. And I knew like my 2 dream jobs after the Air Force was basically like, I want to avoid putting together a resume to get a real job. I want to avoid applying back for school. I just like was mentally cooked and just felt like I had been getting kicked for a while in the situation I was in. And my dream jobs were either to work at a running store or a bike shop. And I got a job in Flagstaff here at Absolute Bikes, and started working at a bike shop, and realized that I know a lot about road bikes and I like road racing and stuff, and I have an interest in that, but Flagstaff is definitely a mountain biking town. And at the time when I started, I knew nothing about mountain bikes. So that was a big learning curve. That was kind of fun. But that also started to give me the free time to start training and making that a priority. And I kind of told myself of like, I'm 25 now, and I just want to take a break from the real world until I'm 30. And I'm just going to do something for me. And right now running is making me happy, and I'm learning about trail running, and this is going to be me. And so basically I just owned that I'm an ultra runner, going from like, but at like back in college, or even when I was in Montana, I didn't know people were doing it as a profession. Like I didn't know that you could be a professional ultra trail runner. Like that would blow my mind of like, wait, why are they paying those guys? They're running 8-10 minute miles for 100 miles. Anyone can do that. And but you got to kind of put it in context of where and when they're doing it. And all of a sudden, when you kind of dig into it, it's pretty badass, and at least my opinion. But I definitely was under that impression when I was running in college of like, So I guess it also relates to like, I say, be careful what you talk shit about, because you'll probably become them. Of like, throughout my college career, I'm like, oh, I'll never be a 10K guy. I'll never do the steeple. Like I'm a 1500 5K guy, and I'm just sitting in the 5K for 4 years getting my butt kicked. And it's like, screw it. This is my senior year. I've never made nationals. Like, give me the damn steeple. And sure enough, I made it to the finals in the steeple, and then I got my butt kicked in the finals. So the steeple's still real hard. So yeah. And yeah, and then you go to like, oh, I'll never be a marathoner. And it's like, well, you lined up for a marathon. Like, so yeah, just be careful what you talk smack about because you might fall in love with it.
Well, Jim, it's interesting because you're thinking to yourself, I'll never be a pro runner. You find yourself as a pro runner, right? But you're in this discipline that you probably didn't think about. And the perception of trail running, you were alluding to it there, and I think it's probably similar for any pretty good college runner coming out, right? They're just like, oh man, these guys are running slow. If I did,
they're jogging.
I went out and ran a trail, I'd go kill these guys, right? I remember I had a friend coming out of college who wasn't as good as of a runner as I was, and I knew he was doing mountain running and all this stuff, and he was like doing pretty well at some local races. I was like, oh man, I know I could beat that guy.
Yeah.
So I want to. It seems like that's a very normal perception, right?
Yeah.
What is the perception now that you have of trail running now that you're in it and you're at the level that you're at?
Well, it's hilarious when you get a guy that should, like, by all means, like, be a stud on the trails too, and all of a sudden, yeah, they're tippy-toeing around of like, yeah, it just brings it back to like, well, not everybody trail runs very well. But then, like, I would say I look at mountains and I look at canyons and I look at landscapes completely differently because it's like, oh, I wonder if there's some trails through there or something. Where like, I mean, as a little kid, I went to the Grand Canyon being from Phoenix, but it never crossed my mind to run. Like, and if you asked me if I wanted to even hike down to the bottom, I probably would have said like, nah, I'm okay. So the idea of just running up the local mountain is like in college. I mean, so actually, you came to you came to the Air Force Academy while I was there.
Yeah.
I think to probably film like a workout Wednesday with Jenny. But we took you on the Huge, and it's like literally the flattest, smoothest, easiest route through the Air Force Academy, and it's built up on this like side of a mountain. And I know like we'd run that same route almost every day because like one of the things, and I jokingly said it while I was in college, of like, yeah, if you learn to explore here, you're going to get beat up so bad you're not going to be able to do the workouts. And then like now I look back at it of like, dude, the routes we could have done from campus to be an ultra runner would be just absolutely epic. And what you can connect it into, and like, I mean, I bet I would have tried to run from the academy up to like Pikes Peak or something and back. And like we did survival training where they basically just stick you out in the woods and tell you can't eat and they don't give you any food for like a week. Basically, we did that up in Woodland Park, and like that's where like Bowerman Track Club posts up for a lot of their high altitude stuff now. And like at the time, like they're like, oh, the academy is technically only like 10 miles as the crow flies, but I mean, it takes an hour and a half to drive there, so you'll never get back. And it's like, now I look at it like, man, I would have gone like just ran back to the dorms and just slept in my own bed and gone to Mitch's and gotten a ton of food and then ran back of like, man, this is just a joke. Like, you guys know nothing. The concept of distance has just completely changed. And yeah, I'd say just outside has just become fun. Like it's just all limitless in the fact of like your imagination with it. And then like, yeah, if you could extrapolate it into some biking stuff too, but I guess I've gotten into some biking and like kind of the distances you can cover on a bike is pretty crazy. But just so many things about the trail running world I never thought would interest me, and it's just yeah, I love doing it now. And it's, yeah, I guess every run now and then you kind of bonk pretty bad, and it's like you get in a little bit of a hiking mode to just get back home, and you're like, oh, that was rough. And like, it's funny when I see Jared Hazen come home and like, you just know he just got cooked of like, what'd you do today? And like, there's been times too of like, I mean, just yesterday I was doing, it was only 14 miles, but it took me about like 3.5 hours. And I got back to the house and just like, my girlfriend's just laughing at me of like, what happened? Of like, it was a little more rugged than I thought, and I didn't take the right trail, and I was just bushwhacking down the mountain, and like, yeah, it's good fun, good training.
I want to flip that question on you, right? We talked about the perception of trail coming out of school, but now that you are, you know, on the elite end of this trail world, now look at the track world, right? And the
Yeah.
roads. What is now your perception of those guys, you know, where you came from?
Well, for one, like just with my own experience doing the half marathon stuff, like I get burnt out mentally by the routine of workout on Tuesday, workout on Thursday or Friday, long run on Sunday, get after it, repeat on Monday, and just week after week, you're just banging out workouts. And like, how do you make the track? I actually love the track. The track is a lot of fun because it's just such an artificially fast surface. It's really like confidence boosting to do workouts on a track because even roads have enough undulation that sometimes a road can still beat you up when you're really pushing your pace, but a track is just, you can really flow on it. So I like that. I guess in my perception now, it's just, I wish track and road runners knew more about the trail world, because I think there would be so many more people that would fall in love with running if people in just the bigger audience just knew that it wasn't just about running around your block, and it wasn't about running roads, and it wasn't to do a workout you don't need to go run a track. Yeah, I mean, like I don't really have that much fun training for a marathon, doing workout after workout. Like it's probably fun for about 3-4 weeks, and then all of a sudden it sucks. So but a lot of it I'm doing by myself too. And I would say like one of my other takeaways with the marathon block is if I were to do a couple marathons and really try to attack it and get my time down and stuff, I think a team is really important. But then it also, like, one of the depressing parts about it is like, yeah, I'm a 2:15 marathon, and like, well, take it as you wish and judge it for what it is. Like, yeah, you're 2:15 until you run anything different. Like, the fact that you're defined by a time really sucks. And I think that was one of my struggles in track, is really mentally breaking through. Like, I think especially my senior year, I think I was in a lot better shape than my times reflected, but I never really broke through. And even the years before, broke through to like the faster heats in order to start catching quicker times and stuff. So like, yeah, I guess the fact I got a problem with being defined by your time, whether you consider yourself a miler, 5K, 10K, marathoner. The fact that people are, I think there should be more versatility, because with trail running, there's so much more of a story behind the run. Like, just to compare my 2019 Western States run to my 2018 Western States is just like comparing apples and oranges. Of like, they're just such different runs. And like, I can even tell you about the days of like the guys that were behind me. And like, if I ever tell you like Francois Dain, this amazing French 100-miler guy, he's just known for like, he won UTMB in 2017 when like everyone showed up. And I have a lot of respect for him, but I beat him by like an hour and a half, and like, that's pretty crazy. But then like, I ran faster the next year, and Jared Hazen's clipping my heels the whole race. And it's just like, what? Like, it's insane that we're just clipping race, like split after split after split. And but then you got to give everything context, and there's so much more of a story to it. And like, the fact that we're running 100 miles, we're starting at Tahoe, and like, you go over escarpment, and basically one of the iconic things is when the top people are going over escarpment, the first like 2,500 foot climb, the sun is coming up in the background over Lake Tahoe, and there's just an amazing sunrise generally. And then you get into this wilderness, and the Granite Chief Wilderness, and then you go through like these scorching hot canyons, and there's multiple of them. And then you pop out in this town called Forest Hill that everybody drives to, and people are just lying down the road and going crazy. there's so much of a story. And then like, well, tell me about your 1500 the other day. And it's like, oh, that sounds cool. Like it just goes to like, is ultra trail running and in general, like even the training aspect of it, of like what you see, what you did, where you went, like the bar stories are so much better. So it's a lot of fun. And I think I wish more people would be open to trying it and going out and exploring it. And it's not a simple transition. I think the faster track runner you are and the better endurance and stuff, I think it puts your ceiling of like how fast and how much you can accomplish potentially like better. But you still got to nail that day, and you got to keep your stomach under control. You got to learn to eat while you're running, which really sucks sometimes. And you got to problem solve a lot on these long races. So I just find them really fascinating. They interest me a lot. Gets me motivated to get out the door, and whether it's a race or a fastest known time, like it's exciting. It's just like, well, how are you going to do it? So like when I'm talking about the Tahoe Rim Trail, it's like, well, you can't do it by yourself. Like basically you're not going to grab your knapsack and a bottle and head out and knock out 168 miles completely by yourself. Like you'll need a really big backpack to do that. People do it. But to do like a speed record, you're not really going to do that. And it's going to take a whole team and this logistics. And generally you'll have to have people leapfrogging each other. And like, there's just these logistical nightmares behind it. And how much are you going to carry? How hot is it going to be? How much water? When are you going to hit nighttime? Like, don't get caught without your headlight, because all of a sudden you're going to be walking through the dark and you can't see anything, and you're going to be moving really slow, which is not good for setting a record. When Kilian Jornet ran the record, he slept like 2-3 hours, and it's like, well, do you take a nap? Do you not take a nap? And it's like, well, I've never ran for over 24 hours, let alone over 35 hours. So it's like, maybe I'll need a nap. I don't know. It's kind of fun to think about. And like, yeah, maybe you run it one year and you don't take a nap, and you run it another year and you're like, oh, I need a 5-hour nap, but you're just clicking on the running sections. And yeah, I get excited about it.
So how does the trail world shake the perception that any fast, relatively fast, track or road athlete runner could jump, if they focused on it, they could jump into trail races and just kill it? Yeah. Or is there truth to that? Is a good runner a good runner?
I think there is some truth to it, in the fact that they can pick some races where they'll transition really naturally. And then once you so even if you get into the 100K on a road, is potentially should be a marathoner's dream. Like, you just keep clicking. But it starts to suck a lot. Yeah, I mean, when we did the Hoka Project Carbon X, it started to get really hot, and these little undulations that were just going up onto these either dikes or berms, but they're maybe 20-foot hills that were a little steep. First 30 miles, they're nothing. I'm cruising through them. 40 miles, oh, here's another one. 45 miles, I am running 8-minute pace up this thing and having to accelerate afterwards. They were terrible. And then in addition, it's getting to be 85 degrees of what marathoners run a record at 85 degrees of and you're just taking these. I mean, I'm pretty sure I took just bottles full of goo and just was dumping it on my head and just whatever. I'll be at the next place, I'll have some water and I'll rinse it off, and it's not a big deal. I just need to stay wet. There are races that'll transition well. There's no reason a top level marathoner shouldn't have the world record for the 50K. And it's been a record that I want to say it's a guy that passed away from South Africa. Josh Cox got really close to it, but I want to say the world record's from 1989 in the 50K road. someone could go get a world record if they wanted to, like legitimately. But a lot of people don't know about it. And then you go, oh, that's like 5.8 miles further than a marathon. I'm not interested. Like, okay, sure. But
it's a logistical question at that point.
Yeah, like, well, where am I going to run afterward? The marathon. I thought that's all you run. Like,
Right.
well, Josh Cox, when he did the Phoenix Marathon, and then he just added on the ASU track and got it certified. But that would probably be the most simplistic. Like, you go from finding yourself of being a marathoner into being a 50K road guy specialist, and they have world championships for it. It's not as big of a deal, and it's not a part of like IAAF world championships, and it's not run on the same day and track as the world champs in track. But there are still competitions with that. But all of a sudden, like, you throw in some rocks, you throw in some down trees, you throw in some rain, you run a race during the night. I mean, how many track guys have experience like with just major bonks at like after running 5 hours? Like, if you ask that on a college track team, like no one's going to have that experience. So there's a learning curve to it. And some people will transition a lot better than others. And if you just throw numbers at it and you take the top 100 marathoners in the world and you just throw them at ultra running, I'm sure like you'll see a shift in times and records being broken. But at the same time, like even year to year, whether it's snowpack or fires or how much flow there is in a river that you have to run across, and maybe like the Rucky Chucky at Western State, some years they boat it, some years you swim it. Well, you're not supposed to swim it. I sent it once though, but you're supposed to hang on to a rope, and it makes it a lot easier. There's things where the course can change a little bit, and so you just get into debatables about that. There's wrong turns. Like sometimes there's stuff like that. Probably the most interesting though is like if you're to drastically, like I would say Kilian does a really sharp end of the stick with like really technical races. He's very good at technical stuff. And he mostly races around 50K to 60K maybe. But if you like take people and run up in Scotland on Glencoe, a track runner's probably gonna break their ankle the first time they try running there if they run full speed. And like, how do you get comfortable running on that? And I don't know. Like, but then all of a sudden you take an NCAA guy that was like won an NCAA title and he grew up as a fell runner. It's like, you might be a pretty good trail runner. You know, like a lot of it's individual. Some people I think transition better than others. Some people like they fall once and they're like, yeah, this isn't for me. And other people fall and they're like, this is great. And like, yeah, it's probably going to work out a little better. I would say, again, the ceiling's higher for probably if you're a really great track athlete, you'll probably have a high ceiling of where you can do, like what you can do and where you can go in the trail and ultra world. But it doesn't mean you're going to have success. And it doesn't mean like, it doesn't just translate. And I think, again, it goes back to motivation of why you're doing it and are you really enjoying it? Because you're going to have bumps in the road and you got to be able to stick with it. And not everything's going to go perfect. So enjoying it and being out there for the right reasons goes a long way.
Jim, I'd love to, you touched on it a little bit when you mentioned, just going out for a run and coming back some days and some, whether it be your girlfriend or one of the other Coconino Cowboys, just seeing you totally wrecked coming back from a run and not really knowing what happened in that space. I'd love to, maybe what people don't know, what was your worst bonk that people might not know about. And the worst thing, like, the Western States experiences have been documented, but maybe what's another story
Yeah.
that would
I mean,
be,
yeah, there's a
I think
couple out
other
there.
trail runners would appreciate.
Well, I mean, probably one of my most rewarding and fun experiences was so in Western States 2017, I had a massive bonk. I got super I don't know. I was running too hard and it was too hot and overheated pretty bad. But that led to not finishing Western States that year. And then I had Ultra Trail Mount Blanc UTMB on my schedule, and I came back and I kind of say like Western States in 2017 set me up of like, and I kind of compare it to when you drink too much and you start you have one of those nights where you're just throwing up so much, and then the next time you go out and you drink and you're just like, oh, I can't do this. It was kind of like that for me for races for a little while, of like when I started pounding the calories again, my stomach just kind of started turning on me. And so at UTMB that year, like I lied down for about a half hour at one of the aid stations just because my stomach, like I was running with Francois. We just finally started to gap Kilian a bit. And then like my stomach really started turning. And basically I just slowed down a ton and was just like, my stomach's about to go again. Like it just happened at Western States. I can't let it get to that point at UTMB. And then I went through one aid station. Kilian passed me there. I think that's when I had a couple bowls of soup at one aid station. And like it's kind of remarkable. Like you feel like you're in there forever, and it's just like, where is everyone? But I made it through there. Kept going to where I was going to see my crew next, and then I just at the next stop I pulled my hat over my head and was just like, I just need some time. And I started kind of sipping on some Coca-Cola, and it settled down my stomach enough. But I went from being in second place to, I think, back to 8th place. But then there was still about 25 miles of racing to go, and lots of mountain passes. And all of a sudden, my stomach settled down, and I was able to get in some calories, and bang, like the rocket fuel was back, and I moved up all the way into 4th place. And then eventually lost one spot to Xavier Tevignard, who's won UTMB a couple times, and ended up settling for a 5th place that year in that 2017 UTMB that I said Francois won. But so that was a good bonk and rally thing. That was kind of cool because I felt like I was really strong and withstood it there. But I was kind of like, man, I messed up Western States. I didn't do so great at UTMB. I'm a little disappointed with it. Like I had to kind of take a break, and like my stomach was getting to me again. So I traveled all the way to Reunion Island, which is out in the Indian Ocean, about 2-hour flight from Madagascar. But typically to get there from the States, you'd fly to France, and then from France, it's a French island. And it is by far just the craziest, most rugged, hottest, humid, craziest race I've ever tried to do. It's another 100-miler. It's got over 30,000 feet of vert. I think Kilian's won it 3 times. Francois won it 3 times. And up until last year, no Americans won it. But Sabrina Stanley actually won it last year. So she became the first American to win it. But still no American guys won it. But it's this crazy like island world, French speaking. And I was winning the race by like hours, and like just hammering. And like it was another race where it started at 10 p.m. You run through the night, and then like I was like, with experience at UTMB, I'm like, man, once the sun comes up, I'm gonna feel so good. It's just we're gonna hit it. And like that was probably maybe around mile 45 in the race, and energy started to come back pretty good. Started to make some good runs, and like running up these really technical, really steep hills and stuff. And then all of a sudden, like just everything crashed, and like my stomach started to go again out of the big hot climb. It's like, yeah, really big climb around mile 60. I think you climb like 6,000 feet in 5 miles sort of thing. Like it's really steep. Like you're hiking up steps the entire time. And it's probably 85 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit with like 90% humidity is like absolutely miserable. But I was going up and just I get to the top and just throw up everything. But I knew there was this long descent, and I'm like, all right. And I see my crew at the end of it. And I'm like, all right, I just got to get it down there. And between like this like 10-mile stretch that was just this flowy downhill that was supposed to be like the breakaway to start finishing the last like 20, 30 miles of the race, which luckily I heard was like, good thing I didn't run it. But I just I never made it down to the bottom. Like I was lying down, second place passed me. It was terrible. And like, basically it was just like, I was not going to go through the puke and rally. And I traveled 30 hours across the world just basically to be like, yeah, I cannot do this again this year. Like I need a little break. And so that was in October. And I think I didn't race for the next 5 months of like, I was so cooked by that one. And I can't wait to go back to that one. Like it's one of these things of like, it's now a bucket list of like my career of like, I need to go back there and I need to have a good race of like, it was such a great experience. And I say it's like the most technical, gnarly single track trail, like continuous single track trail that I've ever ran on. And it was just a lot of fun. Really challenging though, and completely kicked my ass. And I should not have tried a third 100-miler that year.
Jim, I'd love to switch gears a little bit from racing into, I think me meeting you and kind of our cross section was, while I was at Adidas for a while, I slung you a couple. I slung a guy, James Bonnet and the Ian Torrance crowd. Slid them a couple pairs of shoes under the radar. And I remember even Western States. You basically ran your first Western States in racing flats and a pair of Boston Boosts. But I'm interested to know, kind of the product, your journey into where you are now, from just basically smashing things in racing flats to what does your toolkit look like today? What is I guess what are the main shoes in your rotation, and what's the model that you're always asking Hoka for another pair of?
Yeah, so probably the first model and pair I'm asking for the most right now is definitely like the Speedgo Evos. They're a really lightweight version, a little stretchier in the upper than the regular Speedgoats, which I think a lot of people say are too narrow. One of the main things that I had to kind of get used to is like having a bit more cushion under my foot. Going from running in a Boston Boost like 4 or 5 years ago, Hoka's kind of felt a little weird, but if I were to try on a Boston Boost nowadays, I would probably absolutely hate it. It's something where the cushion under the foot, especially in ultra running, I think is really nice. It protects you a lot from the rocks. Imagine just slapping your foot for 10 hours straight. Like your foot's not going to like it. Putting a little more cushion under there is a bit nicer. But I ran Western States 100 in the Speedgo Evos, and then I lined up for a fast 30K, that Sierra Zinal race in Switzerland a couple months later, and I ran that race in the same exact shoe that I just did a 100-miler in. So it's a pretty lightweight version of the Speedgo, and it drains water really well, so it's pretty versatile for trail running. It's also got like full Vibram bottom on the good. So one of the downsides of something like a Boston Boost is like sometimes just there is not enough tread on that shoe, and you're just gonna slip and eat it pretty bad. So
totally fair.
Learning to like trail shoes is definitely you need it sometimes. Like you don't need it until you need it, but usually it's too late, and you should have worn some trail shoes, sort of thing. Of like it'll definitely save a couple slips, which is worth it because falling sucks and it hurts, and it takes a couple days to come back from that. Probably the 3 shoes I have going in my rotation is like I mean I'm like full blown Hoka nowadays because like I thought the Clifton was going to be my go-to in high mileage big marathon training, but I actually kind of fell in love with the Bondi 6. I think I had the Bondi 5s and I didn't really like them. And for the most part, that's like the stereotypical big ass Hoka shoe that people are like, whoa, that's a big shoe. But the Bondi Sixes were really great, and yeah, I was running 175-mile weeks in that shoe, and it definitely kept me healthy. And I've kind of kept that shoe in my rotation. And then the other trail shoe that I use the most is the Mafati, Evo Mafati, and that's another big cushion shoe with a lot of grip. And that one's got more cushion in the forefoot than the Speed Goat does. So I like that one for longer outings. That's probably my go-to Grand Canyon shoe, because in the canyon you get a lot more step stuff, and it goes back again into that kind of slapping thing. Yeah, I mean, like your feet get swollen after 15 hours of doing that sort of thing, and having a bit more forefoot cushion like that really feels good late in races. So yeah, those are the 3 shoes I've been rotating for training right now, because right now I'm not doing much of any speed work, and just doing kind of fun general blunt training, trying to keep the mileage around 100 to 115, probably 17 to 25,000 feet of vert, but I've gotten into some Zwifting as well, so that's been kind of fun. And that's more, I guess, staying in my garage is something I'm trying to promote, so that's what I've been logging more publicly. But most of my runs have been all from my house, so yeah, I run Eldon Lookout Trail almost every day, so yeah, it's a good thing I like that trail.
It's cool, Jim. I think, I mean, although we've gone all over the world at this point in this interview, and we've thrown out some, kind of staggering statistics, but at the same time, you can bring it all the way back to just getting out the door, doing some of these easy runs, going to the trail nearest your house, doing some Zwifting in the garage. I think it's a little more, trail running might seem a little more applicable, might not seem as applicable as it might actually be to some people. I think if we were trying to get more people into trail running, how do people start that transition? And B, are there any other track runners or athletes out there that you see that you're like, man, that girl or guy would crush it out on the trails? And I guess, how do you make, how do you get them out there?
Yeah, I think probably the first people that catch your mind is when someone's got some good success on like the track or the roads, and you see that they're just like randomly dabbling in some trail running and some climbing up some mountains, of like, why are they doing that? Of like, that's kind of a hint of maybe like they got a bolt loose and like they might be one of us.
A bolt
sort
loose,
of thing.
I like that.
Yeah. So it's always interesting when you see a track guy on a trail. As far as no one real specific, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
What if I toss out a couple examples? So
yeah, I could give you a grade on someone's potential to trail run.
This is great. This is great.
Yeah,
this
let's
is great.
do it.
All right. Let's
It'll probably
go
be
with
A through C. So unless I really, I don't know, maybe not. Who was it?
I'll get a couple people that maybe are in the Flagstaff community, and then a couple others, just to keep it fair. So,
okay.
Fable.
Maybe a B-. I think he's got really high ceiling. I don't think the buy-in would be very good. So I think the Y would disappear quickly.
Kellen Taylor.
I think she'd do good. I give, I mean, again, it goes to like full commitment. Like, so on that, I think Rory Linkletter's probably got the most potential, because I could see him just being like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And like all of a sudden he just goes all into it. I would give him the highest grade on it, but Kellen's really tough. And I think she gets stars and stripes across the board for, especially if it got into some like a backyard ultra. Kellen would be really good. I think she just would keep going no matter what. Yeah, I think she's really tough. She could do real well.
Okay, I'll get out of Flagstaff for a second. Desi Linden.
Des. I think Des has an interest for it. I think she's got the bolt loose, so I think I would give her a big thumbs up to get into it. I think with a lot of this, it all depends. It goes back into what let's. Are we throwing them at Western States? Are we throwing them at Comrades? Or are we throwing them at UTMB? Or like we could pick a different race too. But those are kind of three classics, big granddaddies.
Yeah, let's say for the sake of the American audience who kind of knows Western States, we'll use Western States as our I don't know placemat here. How about let me cut down distances a little bit more. Lopez Lemong.
I don't think he'd do so good. He doesn't count laps in the 5K too well, so I don't know. I say that because I was at that race, but the ceiling's high. The ceiling's really high.
Yeah.
Most of these people I haven't seen on a trail. I could take them on a trail run and give you a really good feedback on it. Yeah, like Abdi, I don't think would do so good in trail running. I'd probably give him one of the lower grades of transitioning. Because I've talked to him a bit more about it, and when I talk about these rocky trails, he's just like, "Oh heck no." So yeah, I don't think so.
All right.
Lopez maybe likes trails, but I think when I saw him when we overlapped in Colorado Springs, it was all road and maybe dirt road. Like there's not a lot of tricky stuff we were hitting in Colorado Springs.
Are there any other Rory Linkletter types where you've like seen them or run with them and just in your mind you're like they probably got it?
Well, I haven't seen Rory on a trail, but I could see Rory taking a pretty hard fall and getting back up and being like, "This is great." So I think he's got a good attitude with it. No, a lot of people just don't run on the trail. And even if people come into town and wanted to like link up, like in the past, I've taken them on really mellow trails of like, please do not twist an ankle. Like I'm worried for you too.
I think this goes back to the perception of track runners is that they're too scared to twist an ankle. So they're not going to run the trail with you.
But they need to be sharp and like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Tell me out of these people who's willing to go do a cowboy loop in the Grand Canyon and like all of a sudden like they're head and shoulders above the person that doesn't want to do it. It goes to attitude and like willingness to be open to doing it. I think really sets you up for success in it because there's gonna be punches thrown at your face sort of thing, and like you got to be able to roll with it. Yeah. I think if you're not into it, you're going to get discouraged and all of a sudden, like, you're going to go, yeah, this sport is stupid. So you got to be in love with the stupid sport.
Jim, I'm wondering, after all, I guess after all the training over the last year and the dabbling in the different variables that you've been trying, it seems like you've played with mileage, you've played with pace, you've played with elevation, you've played with time on feet. I think the trail fans out there, they want to know if Jim Walmsley shows up to a UTMB, why is he different than all the other years? Is Jim Walmsley going to be the first American?
Oh,
sure, this year.
Well, yeah, so this year I have a plan to show up without poles for the first time. I finally decided that poles suck and I don't want to carry them. And then the other idea is I want to send UTMB and like try not to hike it much. So with that, most of my run yesterday was a lot of hiking. So I'm trying to get better at it. But because I almost feel like a metabolism wise, like sometimes when I slow it down a bit, I can bonk a little differently. So it's kind of trying to read that a bit. I think I know for one thing though is like at one point in the race I'm going to be in contention, like whether it's mile 2 or whether it's mile 100 at the end. Well, it's 105 technically. But I'll find a way to at least give myself a chance, whether it's like suicide or not. And hopefully it's a good enough day where it just sticks. So, yeah, I would say I'll find a chance to put myself in a position to win it at some point. It's better to find that position later in the race than too early in the race. But yeah, each race is a little different, and sometimes it's, I think, good to run from the front, and sometimes it's good to call bullshit and say like, there's no way they're sticking that. So you got to be adaptable on race day. UTMB is a bit different because you don't know who's going to be just going out on fire the first 50K, and it's a long way to go. You got to get a lot better with the headlight, I think. So we'll see.
Some things to look forward to, some excitement. Put it out there.
When's your guys' first UTMB going to go?
I'm going to see how yours goes first this time.
There's shorter races over there. So there's OCC, it's only 50K and only like 3 little passes. There's CCC, which is 100K, and Americans have had very good success there. I think Americans should do good at both of those because basically they're short enough where it's full send on all of the mountains. Like, you're not getting into any sort of hiking. You're just going to balls to the wall for those. So those are pretty fun. So even like the 100K CCC is pretty cool. But then there's TDS, which is this like awkward distance route thing that keeps growing closer to UTMB. That one's pretty hard, but it's not the main event. So like, it's just kind of weird. It's a hard one. It doesn't interest me too much because UTMB is like the title fight. And that's the one where you need to show up and you need to win it, and the heavyweights are going to slug it out. So that's the one that gets me excited. But there are shorter races if that's your cup of tea.
Well, I appreciate you thinking about us, because that actually, that leads me to my last question for this, for our interview, Jim, is, for those of us, and again, we'll focus on US audience or people that are traveling within the US. If you had to recommend a stretch of trail, and we'll say 10 miles, that 90% of people could probably, like decent runners, could go out and do, and you're like, if there's one trail you'd recommend for people in their travels around the country, what trail would that be? Where should I go run 10 miles that I won't be able to get that experience anywhere else?
Tahoe is pretty special. So, I mean, a short stretch that really comes to mind is the Flume Trail. And it's like probably 2,000 feet above Lake Tahoe and looks over on the usually snow-capped White Mountains across the lake on the California side. That's a really cool trail. It's impossible to take a bad photo. I'm a sucker for big trees and stuff, so Northern California does really well. And if you're talking redwood forest and stuff, for my backyard, the Grand Canyon's pretty spectacular, but probably it's going to be a little longer than 10 miles. So it's you could do like 13, 14 miles to go down and up. But that would be pretty ambitious for a lot of people, and the Park Service definitely does not recommend it. They put signs up, don't do it. But we try to do it a couple times. So yeah. What else? There's my favorite trail down in Sedona is probably this trail called Hangover Trail, and it's on this red rock stuff, and it's really great views. So that's a 9-mile route. It's like a spoon, but technically the really spectacular part's only about 3.5 miles. There's all sorts of gems. I mean, I think like how I got into trail running and what kind of got me interested is like I bought a hiking book when I was living in Montana, and like I like to run. I want to go see a waterfall. I want to get to the top of a mountain. I want to go see things, sort of thing. And it's like I found a hiking book and started picking out hikes. Like, you throw away the ones that sound kind of boring, but the other ones that appeal to you, like, go run it. Like the idea that you can go run a hiking trail instead of hiking it, which takes 6 hours, you can go run it in 2. And you just put a camera or like phone in your pocket. Changes everything. So that's what got me out. So I was living in Montana, so I was I feel pretty fortunate of just the coincidence of that. So it kind of depends where you live, but go grab a hiking book. And if you don't live near somewhere that inspires you, well, plan a trip to go somewhere that does. And yeah, outside's pretty cool. Despite the virus everywhere, don't do it right now, but someday. Yeah. So, but yeah, find the path less traveled as well right now and currently. So go on a trail that someone else isn't going on.
Nice. Well, I think that's well put. A couple good recommendations, but ultimately, I think if you're into running, finding new places to explore is like part of the adventure. So we really appreciate you coming on, Jim, and giving perspective on the worlds, the world you came from, the world you're in now, and how to connect that with some folks that are, who knows, maybe thinking about it, maybe thinking about challenging Jim Walmsley down the road, or maybe just happy to hear you talk about it. So we really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. It's been fun catching up.
All right. Well, we're gonna hopefully see you at that UTMB if they have that thing. So good luck.
It's pretty fun. If not, California is not that far away. There's a lot of ultras in California, so good spot.
Cool. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah. See ya.
So Al, a nice lengthy conversation with our boy Jim Walmsley. It felt like as long as one of his runs probably is. That was about the length of our conversation. So. But it's interesting. I like I said in the conversation, I know trail running. I'm familiar with it, but there's so many details and intricacies. And even when you ask him what are the disciplines, he's like, well, there's a lot. There should probably be more. You can specialize so much, but overall, it's a lot of great information and interesting to hear about some of his goals this year that I assume some of the folks out there in the trail community got to be excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Tahoe Trail one is really interesting because like you said, the people who have the record now, I mean, going after a Kilian Jornet FKT is always, got to be salty. It's not soft as some people might call, some records. So keeping an eye on that will be super interesting when he finally pulls trigger on that. There's a lot of people who I think would dig that. I think some of the other interesting anecdotes he mentioned was like, I thought a cool quote was like, he said, you don't need a scale to know you're fit. I think that's like I don't know, just like, it's interesting because he's so analytical, right? And he does thrive off of these numbers and these like Strava stats that are just like unbelievable. But he does have this cool intuition about him that maybe he's gained over the last couple of years about like listening to his body. And, I think that the element
in a lot of
not
ways
needing a scale. He mentioned the like sex drive thing. I think that like that's some really interesting insight, and just being overall like grumpy. Like
keep it really simple,
like listen to your body. And I think it's like he almost has to, because again, like we kind of chatted about, no one's even been in his realm. So it's not like there's a playbook for what he's doing or how he should be feeling. So like the variables are just like whatever he can extrapolate from his own body at that point.
Yeah. Last week I had a day where I think I was a pain in the butt to my fiance, and I fell asleep at 9:00 that night. And you of all people know that I normally don't go to bed super early. So I woke up the next day, I felt so much better. And I was like, I was so exhausted yesterday all day. And it's just, it's those little things. You're like, why was I irritated yesterday? And it's like, sometimes it's literally just you don't have enough rest, or your body's just overworked and it just needs to lay down. Like it can be that simple.
Just start listening to your body. Stop overthinking it. My wife would tell you that for sure. Nutritionally, it's like, there's a reason that you should stop eating that thing. Like your body's telling you not to eat it. Stop eating it. Like don't put a label on your diet. Just stop eating the thing. Your body's telling you. Some of the other like interesting anecdotes. I mean, we started talking about what athletes would be successful or could be successful on the trail. I think, Ryan, you and I were kind of chatting, but it's like, okay, track fitness does translate, sure, but to a point. And like he kept saying, you got to have a bolt loose. And there's something to it where, there's that bolt loose, and there's that when you do get your ass handed to you and you do have that bad day and you are on the side of the road throwing up, are you willing to come back? He clearly has that in spades. He keeps coming back to the places where he was probably in the darkest moments. But that's what separates the speedy track athlete to the legit trail runner. You might be able to run 13:30, but are you able to do it after throwing up everything you just guzzled and you're handed pulls in the middle of the night? Yeah. Good luck doing that with a headlamp on in the night in the Alps. Okay, so because he is a legit track person, he has legit speed and he's made it translate, and not everybody can do that, and it's not, I guess, that applicable or easily translated as some people might want to assume.
Well, and I think he really leaned into the why, right? Like we threw out a name and it's like, oh, how good are they? And even to what you were just saying, but then it was like, but did they really want to do it, right? And I think that was one of the biggest takeaways of the whole thing for me is like when I think of trail running, I love running trails, right? I'm not running trails like him, but if I have a choice to go out on a run in Austin on the road, or even Town Lake is a trail, but it's so accessible to everyone in the city. It's almost not a trail to me. So I'll go to like the east side of town where there's like kind of some trails just because I like that better, And so like, but understanding your why and at that level, understanding your why, like, why are you going to go suffer for 14 hours? Like, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to beat Jim Walmsley that bad? Because you probably, like he said, he's like, and you brought up Joe Gray. It's like, I mean, if he's just going out there to try to beat me or like break a record, like he's probably not going to be set up for success. You got to really enjoy this. And like, you really have to hone in on your why. And that's like, it's something you hear a lot in business and life in general. And he like
Definitely.
really, he owns it in why he runs trail and why he runs long ass mountain runs. So, but anyway, I think he, he mentioned the three big ones: UTMB, Comrades, and Western. Western, he's got. He was scheduled to do UTMB and Comrades this year, and Comrades is postponed. Sounds like he finally has decided, regardless of if it's scheduled or not, he's gonna opt out. But UTMB, if it's on, it sounds like he's going for the win. And as you said, that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like the perception of Jim is like, yeah, he's really fast, but he could never hang on the real technical European Alp. And like, again, like that's an overall perception of Americans in general. And like, that's, if I had to summarize American trail running, like how it's perceived by the Europeans or the rest of the world, it's like, yeah, Americans like to run really, really fast, but they can't handle the trails, which on the men's side, fine. It's like an American male has never won UTMB, but we've seen it done by multiple females, and which is, I think, an interesting, analysis of, why one it has been more successful than the other. So I guess who's going to finally break through that wall? Why is Jim better equipped to do it this year? He said it might be suicide, but I'm going to go for it. And it's like, yeah, that's Jim. And it's like, it's okay if he burns out, and I think that's why he's so good, is like, I might blow up. That's totally okay. He has no fear about complete failure. And I think that's what makes a good ultra runner.
Yeah. And it's, some people might get annoyed when someone throws out a big goal that's hard to attain. But, on the other hand, that's what makes sports exciting. And I think that attention also brings folks outside of the normal trail scene to watch something like that, when someone throws out a big goal and someone that has some crossover from where they came from. So I like it. I think it'll be interesting to follow, and hopefully that race actually goes off. But that is one thing we'll have to wait. I will say, while we close out here, it was nice this week. We've touched a lot on how COVID and this virus has affected our industry in the running world. And today we got to actually talk about running and trail running, and hopefully some of the audience learned some new things. And we got to take a step away from the negatives that we've been experiencing and focus on some new things and some things that maybe some folks didn't know as much about. So it was a good change today.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's like he's using it as an opportunity. Now I get to try this course record attempt that I've never been able to do. So I think it goes in the vein of our theme here. It's like, what is this an opportunity instead of a hurdle?
Yeah. So, well, with that, we'll close it out for episode 5 here. We'll look forward to seeing everyone next week, episode 6. It is an exciting one for me. It's a 10-year anniversary of a rather large, significant race in my announcing career. So I'll leave it at that and let you folks take a guess at what it is. But Al, as always, great times and great seeing you. So until next week.
Cheers, guys.
Hey, and
thank you.
The show also iTunes, Spotify, on FlowTrack. You can get the show on all mediums now. We'll see you next week.